Hi, in this video I'm talking about 3 habits that cause your anxiety. And it's really important to recognize that a lot of your life is actually driven by habit. Much, and I don't know what percentage, but I'm going to say like 98% of what we do is actually done through habit. So we could call it a habit, or we could call it a brain program that makes it happen. I mean, you brush your teeth the same way, you dry yourself after a shower, you eat your food, you have the same, forms of communication, you speak with the same idioms, etc. You walk in the same way, so much of what we do is habit. But a lot of what we think and feel is also habit. And so you're probably running habits or programs that create your anxiety if you're having an anxious experience. So fundamentally, if you're not having the life experience that you want, only you can change it. The negative things that you're experiencing are probably they're probably habits. And in this video, I'm going to tell you how you can change those habits. But the first thing we have to recognize is that you create your own reality. Now, I know it might sound a bit strange because you think that you live in the world and the world is the world doing its thing, but that's not really how it works. And I need to just explain to you how you create your own reality, because this will give us a clue as to how we reprogram your brain to give you more of what you want and less of what you don't want. And actually, it's fundamental in changing those habits that give you anxiety. So let me explain how it is that you create your own reality. So your brain sits in your skull and it's in the dark. Your brain has no window on the world. The only information that comes into your brain is through your senses. Sight, sound, smell, taste and feel. And all of that information comes in what we might think of as neural code, because you have photons of light that hit your eyeballs, that activates some neurons, and those neurons send principally a Morse code, a dot, well actually it's not even Morse code, it's just dots and no dots, so it's a binary code to your brain. Your brain interprets that to suggest the color blue, or a chair, or a cloud. And it does that through experience. That's what you learn as a baby, how these neural dots turn into actual representations. It's the same with auditory sound waves, molecules of taste and smell, and also neurons, right? So all of the information that comes into your brain is encoded. Your brain decodes it, and it forms a virtual reality simulation, like an internal simulation of the external world. So it is true to say that you don't respond to the external world, you respond to your simulation's interpretation of the external world. It's the same for everybody, it ever was thus, and it's just a fact. And I know it sounds strange, but it's just the way it is. I mean, we think, this is really interesting, we think that we see a moving world. But do you remember the old reel-to-reel cinema films, where they project all these static images fast enough, it gives us the impression that we're looking at a movie? Well, that's exactly how your visual system works. We don't see movement, we see a series of static pictures which are projected in our virtual reality simulation to give the impression of movement. We're completely unaware of all of this, so that's just what it is. That's not the point. The point is that if you're anxious, it's because your internal simulation is making you anxious. It's not because there's necessarily a threat out there, it's because your internal simulation is generating the perception of threat. And we're going to come to that because that's incredibly important. So, if you want to stop being anxious, we have to reprogram your brain, and it is entirely possible to reprogram your brain, but you have to be deliberate about it. So, I hope that's so far so good. Let me get to the first habit that is causing your anxiety. Oh, and by the way, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, I really would appreciate it if you'd subscribe, because it helps the algorithm to promote my videos to some degree. And if you find this useful and interesting, because this is the sort of nitty-gritty of the psychology of anxiety, then other people might find it interesting. But if you don't subscribe, then YouTube doesn't really show the videos to people. So the first one is that you worry without awareness in an effort to make yourself feel more in control. You worry without awareness. So your brain's actually going through these worry processes and you're not really aware of it happening because it's so habitual, it sort of falls below the radar. This worry process can often help you to feel a little bit more in control. Now, in a previous video called Why You Worry, I shared with you the Freedom from Anxiety ladder. This is basically what it looks like. And here's a picture of it. And in the Freedom from Anxiety ladder, you notice that step 1 is understand. Well, I've made a couple of videos on understanding what anxiety is. You'll see the 5 doors to anxiety and also intolerance of uncertainty and why you worry. But it's the second step that I'm looking at right now, and that's identify. And if you worry without awareness, then you're allowing the worry process to generate anxiety, but you're not aware of it. So it's a habit of thought that you have no control over. And so we always need to get more awareness of those internal habits, those processes, those programs that are making us have the outcome, the experience, the anxiety that we don't want. So I'm going to suggest, if you're on the mission here to be free of anxiety, which is entirely possible, get yourself a notebook and spend at least a day, but preferably a week, writing down or giving yourself like a tick in a column every time you notice a worry. Now, most of the time, worries are below the radar, and that's just the nature of the process that's overlearned, it's habitual. But as you spend more time focusing on it, you become more aware of the worry process, and therefore you have the potential to have more control over it. So, basically, get your notebook, and for a day, in the first instance, every time you notice a worry, put a tick in the notebook. Do it the next day. Do it the next day, and recognize that the more attention you pay to it, the better you get at recognizing these worries. This is the first step. Well, it's the second step really on the ladder. The first step being understand. But this identify is really important, because if you can't see a habit in action, then it's very difficult to be able to change it. And that's what we're ultimately after, changing these bad habits. The second habit or bad habit that causes your anxiety is that you perceive danger where none exists. If you think about it, anxiety is the experience, the emotion of fear, okay? But principally nothing much happens. I mean, nothing actually happens. And I need to explain to you why this is, and it's such a pernicious and dangerous thing that it's really worth understanding what anxiety is and how it's generated. So, millions of years ago, we developed the fight or flight system in common with all mammals and lots of animals. If you perceive a threat, your body activates through adrenaline and cortisol the fight or flight system, which prepares you to run or to hide or to fight or to flee, whatever. Okay, so it's the survival system that goes along with the perception of threat. So, the threat perception system is incredibly powerful. It generates fear. You can't ignore fear, which is why anxiety is so pernicious, because anxiety is predicated on the emotion of fear. Now, millions of years ago, we had no imagination, we had no language like other animals, and so if we perceived a threat, we'd react to it. Interestingly though, there was a book came out in the 80s called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, is that when we were just clever animals, as soon as we recognize that there's no threat or we've dealt with a threat, we go back to being calm and relaxed. Human beings don't do that, which is why human beings get ulcers and prey animals, herd animals, don't. So the crucial point is that your fight or flight system was designed to deal with external reality threats. Now, as we developed language and imagination, we have two realities now. We've got external reality and we have internal reality. We have our internal simulation of the world. And so now we have the fight or flight system designed to deal with external threats, but we also have an internal reality that's able to imagine threats. And so anxiety fundamentally is the imagining of threat that doesn't exist. So the second habit is that we perceive dangers and threats, but actually they don't exist in the external world, but we're still activating the fight or flight system that was created to deal with external reality threats. So the whole thing about anxiety is it's a mistake that your brain, your internal reality system is making. And that's one of the key takeaways to help us to reprogram our brain, because once you know your brain's making a mistake, the thing to do is to reprogram it to stop making the mistake. The third habit that I'm going to talk about is that through practice, through habit in essence, you have come to believe that you can't cope, and therefore it's probably better to avoid situations. Now, the habit system works like this, particularly with anxiety. If you're in a situation where you perceive some uncertainty, remember one of the doors is intolerance of uncertainty. If you perceive some uncertainty, it's a cue that enables you to get into this sort of negative habit loop. And it works like this, look. So this is the picture of the habit loop, and this is it in a bigger format for you. Let's say you're invited to go to a party. And because you don't know a few people at the party, and you haven't been to this party before because a party is a new thing, your intolerance of uncertainty kicks in, and you're able to go, well, hang on a minute. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict whether I'm going to be safe or not. This takes you to the next step, which is the worry step, which is the habit, the negative habit that we're talking about right now. You go, well, what if people don't like me? Well, what if I don't talk to people? Well, what if there's nobody there that I like? Well, what if I feel like I'm really boring and no one's interested in me? Well, what if it gets really horrible and I feel really exposed? And that what if is the sort of the routine, the habit routine that you generate, that you kick off. This is the thing that's below awareness. This is the thing that drives that feeling of threat. And so what you do is you move to the next step, which is the outcome. Better to stay home, better to stay safe, better to avoid doing something because, well, we don't know what's going to happen. And so it might not be a very nice outcome. But when we do that, when we avoid, what's really happening is that we're reinforcing this negative habit of feeling like we couldn't cope if something wasn't exactly how we wanted it to be, or if we had to put a bit more effort into it, or if we had to actually manage external reality. I mean, the external reality is, if you were to go to a party, there'll be some people there you like, probably some people you don't like, some people you talk to, some people you don't talk to. I mean, you know, it's just a thing. It's a mixer of people, of social things, and so it's just a microcosm of the external world in a sense. But if you want to avoid the external world, if you want to be like allergic to not knowing what's going to happen, then you stay home, you avoid, and you've reinforced the habit. And that is a very damaging thing to do. So we've got these three habits which are absolutely pernicious, they're very damaging, and you recognize, of course, that the nature of a habit is that it won't change unless you change it. For habits to change, we can't really change the way that you perceive things right now because that's the consequence of the habit, right? So you're prone, let's say, to perceive things as threatening when they might not be. Your anxiety response is normal and natural, and we can't stop that, but it's inappropriate. That's the point, right? So what we want to do is we want to change the bit in the middle. The habit of thinking, yeah, but what if it could go horribly wrong? But what if it's going to be a disaster? We want to change the habit of catastrophizing it to some degree. And I'm going to teach you a tool that I have used many hundreds of times in clinical practice. This is a brilliant tool because it always works, because it's basically the truth, and your brain wants to be calibrated more accurately to the external world because that's the best way to ensure your survival. So imagine this: we have the external reality and we have the internal reality. Now, this is me. In external reality, I feel safe. In internal reality, I feel safe because I have no internal reality threats and I have no external reality threats. For the bulk of people watching this video, that would be untrue. I'm going to hypothesize, right? I'm putting this on you, but you can argue in the comments. For you, in external reality, you are safe. In internal reality, you do not feel safe. That's the nature of anxiety. I do not feel safe. Anxiety is an overestimation of threat. You are safe, but you don't feel safe. And that's the thing that we have to retrain your brain to stop giving you, to recalibrate it in essence. And I'm going to give you a tool now that will do that. So I would say, I am safe, I feel safe. You would say, I am safe, I don't feel safe. Therefore, it is true that you are safer than you feel you are. And this is critical because we're kind of saying to your brain, hang on a minute, brain, I know that I feel anxious, but I'm actually safe. What's going on here? And this forces your brain to go, okay, well, hang on a minute. And it delves into these habit processes, and it's quite amenable to changing them, but you have to tell it to change it. Not by saying, brain, I don't want to be anxious. That's pointless. You have to stop the interpretation part, the habit part, the routine part that generates this anxiety. And so you're going, brain, I feel anxious, but I'm not unsafe. What's going on here? What's the point of this? And so we generate this true statement, I am safer than I feel I am. And then we practice it, because if you want to change a habit, you have to practice. Because if you don't have an alternative to the habit, then you've got to have the habit. Obvious, right? So you have to have something alternative, something different. So when you're cued or you recognize something as uncertain, etc., you have an alternative to going through this normal routine of generating a huge amount of anxiety and then avoiding stuff. So this is the work if you want to do the work. First of all, say to yourself, I feel safe. And we go, okay, I feel safe. Take a moment, think about it. I feel safe. How true does that feel for you? 0, it's not at all true. 10, it's completely true. Write the result in your book, date it. I feel safe. Now, if you're particularly anxious, you're going to go towards 0. It's not true. I don't feel safe. If you're feeling robust, you go, well, yeah, I'm safe. Yeah, 8. Okay? But that's likely to move. If you're habitually anxious, your feeling of safety is mobile. It goes up and down. My feeling of safety doesn't go up and down because I'm not anxious. And therefore, we want your feeling of safety to be strong. Yes, I am safe. And stable. It doesn't move in response to what you're thinking or how you're feeling. Okay? So, you rate that, date it. And then you do this exercise. You say to yourself, I am safer than I feel I am. Now, you say it under your breath, I'm safer than I feel I am. You move your mouth, which activates different parts of your brain. You hear it and you think it, okay? I'm safer than I feel I am. You do 10 repetitions in a set. I'm safer than I feel I am, I'm safer than I feel I am, I'm safer. 10 repetitions in a set. And then you do 20 sets a day, spread out throughout the day. So that's basically every 20 minutes, every half hour. Now people say to me, well, I haven't got time to do this. I've got to work, I've got kids to look after, etc. The whole thing, if you tot it up, will take you 6 minutes. But it's a tool which inserts itself between this perception of threat and this outcome of feeling anxious and avoiding stuff and feeling frightened. Okay? It's a really incredibly useful, it always works if you do it, important tool. If you can't devote 6 minutes of your life to not being anxious, well, you're not going to recover from being anxious fundamentally. I mean, that's basically what it is. You can reprogram your brain, but you have to be deliberate about it, and this is that deliberate action. Now, as you go through your week and you tick box, well, oh yes, I was anxious, yes, I worried there, yes, I recognize I was feeling a bit threatened there. Now, once you've recognized these things, you can insert, I'm safer than I feel I am, 10 repetitions, 20 repetitions, I'm safer than I feel I am, I'm safer than I feel I am. And the closer you can insert this mantra exercise to the recognition that you're feeling something, thinking something, imagining something, the better the retraining of your brain will go, because you're attaching an alternative to the bad habit. And fundamentally you can't extinguish bad habits, but you can overwrite them. And we overwrite them by putting not as much effort in, but some effort in, deliberate effort into overwriting the bad habit. If you overwrite the bad habit, then you are fundamentally freed from the bad habit. And if you free yourself from these 3 bad habits of anxiety, then you're going to get massive amount of extra freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of emotion, freedom of action. You can basically do what you want, and it's okay, because you have overcome these 3 habits that cause anxiety. I hope you found this interesting. Please like and subscribe. Please leave some comments to share your experience so that other people can learn something from your experience. That's really, really useful. So, thanks for taking the time to watch and listen, and I'm Anxiety Coach.